All right, can everyone see my screen today?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to first open up with a little brainstorm exercise with y'all to kind of gear the room and kind of get us started. So, what are some concerns or pushback you are hearing from your faculty and staff about behavior? But what are some concerns or pushback you are hearing from your faculty and staff about behavior that they're seeing in the school, in the classrooms?
Would you like for them to put their responses in the chat?
Yes, or they can unmute. If someone wants to unmute and share verbally, that'd be great as well.
They'll say that their parents don't care, so why should I care?
Okay, so family and parental involvement.
And in the chat, we see things, lots and lots of responses. I can't teach the well-behaved students because of the behavior of the challenging kids. And I can't teach because, and you can put in your response, teachers are tired and the parents don't support, disrespect from students, and an avalanche of social media rumors. People want an easy fix, no parental support.
Absolutely. And those are things that are being shared across the globe in terms of education and behavior, right? When our focus is on dealing with disrespect, students not engaging in the learning, that creates hardships for us as educators to get across our content and our standards. Some other concerns and pushback, and this list came from our TAC committee as well, having conversations with people in my building about their concerns and pushback, lack of support from building administration, the district level administrators making too many demands and changes in policies. Okay. What we did in January is something we're going to totally be doing differently when it comes May. Consequences are not severe enough. I hear a lot about, teachers being upset about sending students to the office and then they come back with a snack or they're returning back to class, in no time without any, severe consequences. Not enough planning time, class sizes, the social and emotional wellness as well is playing a big part. How we discipline our students and the way we discipline them. And of course, the respect for the teacher profession overall. So now I want you to think about one of these quotes and how you view it and which one you agree with the most and why. Number one, all behavior is an attempt to communicate a need. Number two, my student's behavior is not my fault, but my response to it is my responsibility. Number three, what we do is more important than how we feel.
You might need to click the three little dots that says more, and then you will see breakout rooms, and you can choose the one that you want to attend. If you have any problems, feel free to unmute, and I'll be glad to help guide you.
What do you want to share? Which quote they agree with and why? This is a quiet room.
Ms. Griswold, should we be seeing your screen?
Yes.
Okay, we don't.
Oh, no.
I think the quote might be the student's behavior is not my fault, but my response to it is. Like, that is my responsibility.
Okay, she said she can't see my screen. Let's try it again. Now, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize for that. So you said number two, that your response is our responsibility?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely, because, think about in terms of behavior, we are only responsible for our responses, right? We can't control how the student's going to respond in their behavior, but we are in control of our response to it. Any other responses?
I would say number 3, just because, you know, a lot of times feeling and emotions get into it, but you have to just be focused on what you're going to do and how you're going to respond, because that's way more important than how you feel about the situation.
Absolutely. And that comes in terms of rational detachment, right? That what the students are doing, what they're saying towards us is really not for us, really. And so we can't take things really personal when we're dealing with students and behavior, especially when we get into talk about defensive behaviors. A lot of times they're exhibiting these behaviors because they need something, they want something, or they're trying to avoid something. And so what we do in that moment is way more important than how we're feeling. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. All right, so let's talk about behavior. Okay, all forms of behavior is a means of communication. Okay, that integrated experience that we all have. Behavior influences behavior. How you act will impact my response to it. Okay, and vice versa. So we can only manage our own behavior. And in that case, we are the sole responsible person for the de escalation process. And so when you're coming to a classroom and you're handling students that are at the defensive level, okay, they are yelling, screaming, maybe questioning, refusing. Um, Even more severely, they may be issuing a threat, okay, either physically or verbally. We have to take into account that at that moment, when they're at that peak stage of the behavior, what we do next is going to determine what's going to happen, right? If they're going to be able to de escalate and come down to their recovery mode, or what we do is going to escalate the behavior even further. And so taking an approach of looking at how to respond to behavior versus how to react to behavior. Responding is a controlled and non-judgmental way of handling things. Whereas when we're reacting to something, it's more more of an emotional reaction. It's that fight, flight, and freeze. And so when you're dealing with students that are exhibiting defensive behaviors, the ultimate goal here is to not react to their behavior, because that's going to cause them to escalate even further and put you into that power struggle with them. And so our goal is to find ways and strategies we can use to help us to respond to behavior, so that way we can de-escalate the situation and get them down to recovery mode, where we're able to have where we're able to open up communication and reestablish those relationships with them. And so here's the cycle of behavior. I think many of us probably have seen this escalation cycle before. If you have been through the CPI training, the Crisis Prevention Institute, that talk about the verbal escalation continuum. And so before things happen, okay, usually you start at this low calming level, and then something triggers you. That's where you see that anxiety plays into a part. So maybe a student is tapping their pencil on the desk. They may lay their head down. They may start fidgeting. And then they get agitated. Okay. Once you try to come over and check on them, right? Be supportive at that level of behavior, but it still may escalate. And so, what do we do next? Okay. When they're exhibiting these defensive behaviors, what can we as staff, as administrators, do to keep our students from escalating into that danger zone, or that zone of physical and verbal threatening? So I want you to think about a time when you got into a power struggle with a student. What might have you done in that situation that probably escalated the situation?
We react to those kids. We instead of trying to figure out what's going on with them, we start yelling back at them or telling them to sit down and we're the boss and they're not going to do this to us.
So reaction, right?
Just sim-
Especially if you are a parent or guardian, or you're taking care of your own children. Sometimes that parental role step in, right? We do not allow our own children to engage with us in that manner. So we're not going to let, another child do that to us as well. So we start to engage with them with the emotional reactions, right? Sit down. I'm the boss. I'm doing this because I can do this. I'm the teacher. You're the student type of situation. Absolutely.
So just like our students, sometimes we have that carry-in behavior and that carry-over behavior depending on what's going on around us.
So a precipitating factor plays a part. Absolutely. Things that we cannot control. Tardiness, being sleepy, get into a fight, all right? If you're having an argument before you get out the car, you're already, escalated. And so to come to a school building and have to another adult say something to you can quickly escalate a situation as well.
And I've noticed that sometimes just our body language and how we approach just walking to the child, we have to be consciously aware of how we approach a child when they're in an antecedent behavior.
And so it's not always what we say, it's how we say it and the way we present the information. So body language, right? Those parallel and nonverbal communication skills can also escalate a situation. So even though your words may sound friendly and comforting, how you're delivering may be the reason why the situation escalated. And so let's talk about what is de-escalation. It's the ability to diffuse anger and avoid aggression. And so it's very important to recognize an individual's behavior that it can change very often and very fast. And sometimes it will catch you off guard. So going back to the example that I feel like I'm being very comforting, I'm being very empathetic with the student, but maybe my hand gestures is what's triggering them, right? Or maybe it's my facial expressions, or maybe because I'm in their personal zone that can trigger them. And so you have to understand that when you're dealing with students, especially those students are in tier 2 and tier 3 behavior students, those are your frequent flyers. Those are the ones that probably end up in your office the most. It's so important that you start establishing relationships with them, having conversations with them about what are their triggers. Okay. Why is it that every time you go into Mrs. Jones' room, third period, I'm getting called in here to come get you? What's happening in her classroom that is triggering you to exhibit these behaviors? The goal of de-escalation is to get the person to what we call therapeutic rapport or recovery. Okay. This is where we are able to see them come back down to a normal state of mind. Their breathing pattern is back normal. Their complexion is normal. If they were angry and mad and their fists were clenched, they're now relaxed muscles. That's the only time you're going to be able to talk to students and reestablish a positive relationship. If I'm triggered, if I'm upset, I don't want to talk to you about anything. I don't want to hear a 15-minute fireside chat, right? And so we have to find ways to get the student to come to this level of recovery, therapeutic rapport, so we can start having conversation with them and start to reestablish that positive relationship. And so many times when I do this training, a lot of people ask me, well, how can I do this? Okay. How can I de-escalate a situation that's already at its peak, especially for administrators? When you come into a classroom or in the hallway, usually that's where you're at, right? You walk into a situation that's already at its peak. You rarely seldom get to see a student at the anxiety level or that trigger or agitation level. You're already coming into the fire. And so, one thing you have to think about is your mindset. When you're coming to a situation, you have to think about listening and understanding what happened and not walking into the situation already ready to punish or instant or inject a consequence, because all that's going to do is escalate the situation. If I'm mad and upset and you tell me, well, hey, Carl, if you don't come down, I'm going to send you to ISS. At that moment, I'm already mad. So I'm going to escalate that situation, right? I'm going to start cussing you out. I don't want to go ISS. I don't care about going to ISS. And so changing your mindset as you go into a situation, thinking about, I'm not going into this situation to punish or enter a consequence. I'm coming in to listen and understand what's going on. Number 2, have a rational detachment to the behavior. Understanding that the behavior is really not directed at you. Some things are to consider are precipitating factors. Some things are going on in that student's life that may be triggering the behavior. And unfortunately, you're just getting the backlash of that. For example, lack of sleep, if they're hungry, not feeling well, if they were tardy to school, or they've been out of school for a couple of days. And so now they're overwhelmed because they're missing so many assignments, family issues. These are things that are out of our control. But we also have to make sure that we take these things into consideration when we're dealing with students with behaviors. Consider the why. This is the reason behind the behavior. Something has occurred. It is not about the what, but the why that helps in the problem solving process. So, as an administrator, if you always going into a situation trying to discipline the what and not understand the why, you're going to always keep getting the same issues. You have to figure out the why so you don't have to always discipline the what. Focus on the relationship. There needs to be a connection before correction. Students feel more safe and comfortable in talking and open up to people they have a connection with. And so if I only time I see you is when I'm in trouble, then that's what you're going to get from me. But if I have a engaging conversation with you at lunch, you're asking me questions about my family, if you're asking me about my interests and things I like to do, if you are being genuine too about those connections as well. For example, how many of you guys use a check-in, check-out policy in your school with students? When you pair these students with faculty and staff in your building, are you pairing them with people that the students like and would like to be paired with? Or do you simply just say, hey, I need you to pick 3 students? Or do you assign certain students to certain people in the building?
We actually poll our students and have our students tell us which staff members they have the best relationship with, and then we poll our staff and match them like that.
Absolutely. And I love that idea. And I appreciate that because for a lot of buildings, though, they don't do that. And so students are paired with adults in the building that they don't have no connection to. And vice versa. You have staff that are connected to students that don't even have in their classroom. They have no idea who this person is or what they have to offer or what is going on with them. And so it's very important that you build relevant and meaningful relationships with your students and not just that, one pager of questions of, do you like math? What's your favorite color? Okay. You need to start thinking about deeper relationships with students. Timing is everything when you're trying to de-escalate a situation. Avoiding audience and making a scene. And so anytime you can get a student away from an audience, that's going to really help with the de-escalation because sometimes who they're around is what's triggering the escalation in the first place. And then, of course, consider your spacing when dealing with students. Check your posture, your position, and your proximity. You don't want to be in a position where at any time a student can escalate and strike you or hit you or able to throw something at you. And so you make sure that you're putting yourself, the bystanders, and that student in a safe space when de-escalating a situation. Are there any questions about these 7 steps? Okay. So, what are defensive behaviors? Okay, this is what this session is about, how we can de-escalate the defensive behaviors. And so, a defensive behavior is usually a common coping mechanism based off a perceived or actual threat. Students usually reach this behavior level because they want something, they're trying to avoid something, or get attention. Um, the problem with these behaviors is that they are very disruptive to the learning environment. It's hard for teachers to teach in an environment where students are talking back, using their cell phone during instructional time, even refusing to work on assignments. When they're trying to engage with the student, they're giving them that silent treatment. They're not even responding back. Walking out of the classroom without permission, making threats. And so we categorize these behaviors into 4 types. We have the questioning aspect, refusal, release, and then intimidation. Questioning. So usually at this stage of defensive behavior, students are asking questions either for fiction or they're trying to pose a challenge to you in class. They can be challenging your authority. Maybe they're anxious and are trying to ask for clarifying questions for clarifications. And so the best response is to give a rational answer. If they're asking you the same question over and over again, I know this is kind of hard, but trying to ignore the behavior, redirect it back to something positive. And of course, at all costs, avoid power struggles. So on this slide, as you can see, I presented some examples on how these responses can work in a classroom when a student is exhibiting questioning as a defensive behavior. For example, why are you talking to me? Give a rational answer. I'm giving the directions for today so you can complete the assignment. I could come back and say, when they ask me, why are you talking to me? Because I'm the teacher. But what is that response going to do? Escalate the behavior, right? And so, of course, our goal is to always keep a calm and safe, positive learning environment. So when they're asking us questions, give rational answers, ignore, redirect, try to avoid the power struggle. Another example, why can't I go to a nurse now, right? We have students that always raise their hand asking us to go to different places in the building. And so simple response, at this time, the nurse is not available, but I will send you as soon as he or she is. Any questions about questioning and how to respond? Next, some students may exhibit defensive behaviors by refusing. Okay, they don't want to do something, which is a way to avoid a task or a situation. Usually, overt non-compliance can be perceived as disrespectful or disorderly to authority. And so when you're dealing with a student that's refusing to do something, you want to make sure that you give simple, reasonable, and enforceable directives. The best tool you have in your building for that is your school-wide rules and expectations. Okay, always redirect the student back to the expectations or the school-wide rules on that, on the reason why you're asking them to do something. And so, for example, if a student is getting irate and you're asking them to leave the classroom, you can set a limit with them. Okay, they say, no, I'm not leaving the classroom. You can't make me. Simple response. If you leave with me now, then we can discuss the situation. We go back to classroom expectations. You can't make me do the work. I'm not doing it. In this classroom, right, going back to our expectations, is the expectation to finish work before you can go to recess. How many of you guys are dealing with cell phone issues in your building, right? Students are taking their cell phones out, they're using them when they're not supposed to. And of course, when a teacher tries to retrieve the cell phone from the student, it becomes a big blow up. I'm not giving my phone, right? You don't pay my cell phone bill. This is, my cell phone, my property. Set limits, simple, reasonable, and enforceable directives. When you give me the phone, then we can discuss when you'll be able to get it back. If you do not, then a parent will be called to pick it up. That's simple. One key thing to know when a student is exhibiting defensive behavior in the refusal stage is to never take or grab anything from that student. That's going to be the number one thing that's going to escalate that situation even further. At all costs, especially if you are a teacher or a regular staff member, not an admin, you want to definitely call and seek help in that situation. Any questions on refusal? The next defensive behavior is release. Cussing, yelling, screaming, making a scene is whatever they're doing they don't have any control over what they're doing verbally. It's important to remain calm and stay detached from the behavior. Remember that rational detachment. Don't take it personally. Something else is going on. There's a why behind the cussing and the yelling and the screaming. And so a great response to this would be to allow the venting. Let them go ahead and get it out. Listen to what they're saying. If you can, isolate the person or remove the audience. The key thing here is to maximize the safety of yourself, that student, and the bystanders. So, for example, a student is yelling and screaming at others in the class. You can simply ask them, if you could, would you like to take a cool down moment with, and you compare whoever their pair person is or mentor in the building, or if it's an area where you're able to move the bystanders, you can move the bystanders and then call for help and have somebody else come in with that student that is doing their release. But the most important thing in that stage to keep it from escalating is to really allow them to go ahead and vent and listen, but also make sure that you're maximizing the safety of yourself, the student, and others. Any question about the release stage? This is a quiet group. Next is intimidation, the verbal and physical threats. All right, so we know that intimidation is usually used to make someone feel afraid or timid. It's a way to show you that you have power over somebody, to belittle them. But in this state, at this stage, excuse me, you want to make sure that your response, that you take it very seriously. Okay, I don't care if it's a kindergartner telling you they're going to slap you, or if it is a 18-year-old senior telling they're going to slap you. You still have to take all threats seriously. Get assistance, make sure you report it, you document it, and then again, you maximize the safety of yourself, that student, and others. So, for example, if a student makes a threat in the classroom saying, I'll bring a gun and shoot everybody, right? We'll make sure that you are immediately calling the administration or the SOR officer. You want to document the statement as well. If a student says something like, if you don't leave me alone, I'll slap you, okay? You don't want to be in that personal space of the student. You don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that you're not in an area where they are able to easily reach you, okay? So you want to check your position, your posture, your proximity in that case. Get their personal space, and again, call for help. With intimidation, verbal and physical threats, you take them seriously. Any question about intimidation? During the de-escalation process, of course, you always want to be able to assess the situation. Okay, you're looking for that tension reduction. Okay, when a student's able to decrease their physical and emotional energy, and that can look like simple as they start to cry, they're apologizing, their breathing pattern becomes regular. But keep in mind that the crisis is not over. Okay, at this stage, you still want to stay alert and watch for any triggering. Once they've reached that therapeutic rapport, then you are able to have a conversation with them and start communicating about the why. Why did this situation happen? Set up like a prevention plan. Talk about reteaching expectations, reestablishing that relationship with them. And so, one example is to set up a get out of trouble plan, which is a resource that I've linked in the document as well. Can everyone see that?
Yes, ma'am.
The get out of trouble plan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so once you're able to establish that communication with the student and able to sit down and have a planned discussion, this is a resource you can use to try to figure out the why and try to find ways to prevent the situation from happening again. For example, ask them things like, what makes them upset? What are some things they can do to avoid getting upset? What can they do to calm themselves when they feel they're getting triggered, excuse me. And then come up with an escape plan. Where can they go, or who can they go to when all else fails? Who or what is their safe space? Is it Mr. Rogers in PE? Or is it Mrs. Salisbury, the front office lady? And utilize that when you find yourself dealing with a student that's starting to escalate. Okay, I understand they're getting upset right here. How about you go ahead and take your cool down moment with, Mr. Rogers or whoever is their safe space. Creating a support team. Okay, we're talking about students that, again, that you probably see over and over again. And so in your building, it's very important that you create a support team for that student, whether it's you as an admin or as someone, the behavior specialist. It can be, another teacher, whomever has a great connection with this student, a relationship with this student. That's the people you want to create a support team for with. Here's one resource that's been very helpful for myself and for our building. Minor Dames Academy is an alternative school here in JCPS. And so, where our building population is students that are tier 2 and tier 3. So, we're constantly finding ways to try to find, trying to find ways to implement behavior interventions that work. Okay. Strategies that are going to help not only keep our classrooms manageable, but also safe and positive learning environment for all our students. And so the purpose of these behavior interventions, number one, is to teach and direct students. Okay. We're the adults as well. We know how to kind of manage our behavior, but we sometimes forget that we're dealing with kids and young adults who do not. They lack those skill sets. And so the intervention should really be focusing on how to teach them how to communicate and make decisions to get their needs met in positive ways, and to equip them with knowledge, skills, and resources to support and encourage them. And so this book is what our building is doing right now. It's a 15-minute focus. It's a quick read. She does a very good job in implementing and giving us strategies, but also solutions and examples of how these actual interventions work.
This has been a wonderful session, and we are out of time. The next session starts in 10 minutes. And if there are any closing comments for the next 2 or 3 minutes, or if there are any questions you might want to follow up with Ms. Griswold about, you can put them in the chat. But this has been a wonderful session. And the next session talks about strategies for positive behaviors. So if you want to remain in room 2, the next session would be a good segue for additional information. Thank you so much. Let's give her a hand. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. And the strategy sheets and everything is linked in the slide deck as well. So you are more than welcome to use those with your faculty and staff.
And we have about 5 minutes before the next session begins. If there's anyone that has a question and want to unmute, we have a couple of minutes, but people will be arriving for the next session. And our speaker is already here in the room. All right, feel free to express your appreciation for all this great information in the chat. And we hope that you will join us in room 2 right here for the next session. And thank you again for an excellent, thorough presentation.
Thank you. And again, anytime my email is on the slide deck, so any questions or you want to pick my brain for some more strategies, just make the connection with me and I'm glad to help.